approach to distributional national accounts. We had some small technical issues. We did a test this morning to see if it all worked, and at that point, it all worked indeed. Now we are struggling a bit with getting in. So we would have normally had Steve McFeely welcoming you all to this webinar. But he is still encountering some technical issues. So instead, I will kick off this webinar. So let's see if I can start sharing the presentation. Yes. So as a way of introduction of the participants for this specific webinar, we would have gotten Steve McFeely, our Director of OECD Statistics and the Data Directorate. As explained, he's not able to join, unfortunately. So we will still have Philip Chan, a researcher on distributional national accounts, sitting next to me, and Karine Tremblay, a researcher in the Statistics and Data Directorate. My name is Joa Twijnenburg. I'm the head of National Accounts Division here at the OECD. And I will guide us through today's webinar, highlighting the relevance of distributional accounts and also explaining the work we have been doing in this area and also highlighting some of the work done by other institutions. So there was quite a lot of interest in the topic. We have 400 registered participants from 72 countries. So we are very pleased with the high turn-up. We have people for which it is quite late in the evening or early in the night. People from New Zealand, Australia, Japan. So very much appreciated to tune in at this late hour. And also people on the Western side, Western Hemisphere, that might tune in at a very early hour at this point in time. People from the US, Canada, we have participants from Panama, Colombia, Argentina. So nice to see such a wide range of participants. So to explain you the setup of this webinar. So this is how we want to structure the webinar. So we will start with a brief introduction on the main reason why we are developing distributional national accounts, provide you with an overview of some of the international initiatives, the aim and scope of the work. We will then focus on the methodology and some of the main challenges as faced by the statistical offices, central banks in compiling these results. I will then focus on the work we have been doing on income, consumption, and saving. And then we'll hand over to Philip to provide some explanations on the work we have been doing on wealth. We will then focus on the next steps for the work and finish with some Q&A. So hopefully we have provided useful insights on the work we are doing, but please let us know if you have any questions or comments with regard to the work. And now it seems like the screen is frozen. Yeah. The content of the webinar, we have the opportunity for you to also engage in the webinar. So we have set up a Mentimeter. So please make sure to have your cell phone ready. So on the screen, you can already see the QR code, and this is to pose some questions to you during the webinar, just to get your view on some of the issues that we are facing in the development of distributional national accounts. So you can scan the QR code. You can also go to menti.com on internet and then type in the specific code. And this will then direct you to the specific questions we have. And also to mention that you can also use the chat to ask questions to us. So we will monitor the chat. So any questions you have during the webinar, any comments, any suggestions, please type in the chat. And we will indeed have a look and indeed come back to some of the questions raised during the webinar at the end of the webinar. So to already see if you are familiar with the Mentimeter, we have a first question that we would like you to respond to, just to get a feel of the participants that we have online at the moment. So we would like to ask you to fill out your main affiliation. So if you open the Mentimeter, we will show it on the screen. Already quite a lot of people responding. I see a lot of responses coming in. We already asked this question indeed when registering, but it's nice to see who is actually at the moment participating in this webinar. A lot of people from the National Statistical Institutes, also quite a lot of people from national central banks. I see also quite a few people from international organizations. Yeah, policy analysts, researchers, some students indeed. So that is very nice indeed to have a mix of people joining the webinar. I think, yeah, for the people from statistical institutes and central banks, they are probably a bit more familiar with national accounts and maybe also with the distributional accounts. So this might include, the webinar might include some information that might be very straightforward to you. So please bear in mind that we also include some additional information for people that may be less familiar with the work. So I think this already gives a good overview of the people that we have online. So maybe Dong-wook, you can move to the next question, the next Mentimeter question. And this is to get a sense how familiar the people in the audience are with distributional national accounts. So are you already quite familiar, or are you just getting familiarized with the distributional national accounts, or not familiar at all? Again, I see a lot of comments coming in. Can you check if there's the recording? I don't know if no, yeah. I see quite a few people that are very familiar with the distributional national accounts, but the biggest group is indeed somewhat familiar. So I think in that case, it's useful that we are organizing this webinar to make you indeed more familiar. So hopefully the webinar is addressing some of your questions that you might still have, and we can move from there. And also indeed some people that are not familiar at all with the distributional national account. So hopefully some useful insights that we might provide during this webinar. Then we have a third question before we dig into the specifics. So indeed, Dong-wook, if you can already show the next question. So also good to know if some of you are already directly involved in the compilation or the use of distributional national accounts. So are you a compiler? Are you a user, or are you not involved in distributional national accounts for the moment? But hopefully after this webinar, we might get a lot of people that are currently saying no to yes, I'm using or going to start using distributional national accounts. I see for the moment quite a lot of people that are compiling DNA results. Not too many current users of the information yet, and almost half of the group is not yet involved in the compilation. So I think that's very useful information, and indeed, hopefully we can provide you with more insights in the work on distributional national accounts in this hour. And then, yeah, please reach out to us, type in the chat if you have specific questions. And also after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. We will be very keen to have more people involved in this work and to provide information as needed. So we will now move to the content side again. So Dong-wook, if you can stop sharing, then we may continue sharing the presentation. Share. Nope. So, yeah. So, as I mentioned, starting with the rationale why do we need distributional national accounts? So why have we embarked on this specific work? So from the national accounts, we already have a lot of information on various sectors in the economy, all kinds of aspects on economic situation in countries. But for the household sector, we currently only have one aggregate. So we may see if the household sector sees an increase of disposable income with 3%. We can see the total wealth of the household sector. But these aggregates may conceal large differences between household groups. And policymakers really need to see how different groups of households are faring. So in this sense, income, consumption, and wealth directly affects people's well-being. It shows to what extent specific groups may be vulnerable to economic shocks. And it may also help to assess the impact of specific policy changes. So what is the current situation of specific groups of households? Is there a need to tune specific policies to their needs? So also a lot of demand for insights in inequalities. It's very important for governments to make sure that no one is left behind. Inequalities may harm economic growth and economic stability, and they may also weaken social cohesion and stability in countries, particularly if the inequality is increasing over time. So distributional results may help targeting policies to address certain inequalities and also to tune the policies to the situation and needs of specific household groups. So what kind of information can we get from distributional national accounts? So they will mainly help answering important policy questions such as what is the gap in income between the highest and the lowest income groups? How is this gap evolving over time? How much wealth is owned by the richest household? How many households may suffer from negative wealth? To what extent is high inflation affecting various household groups, particularly relevant over the past couple of years and also in the recent months with increasing energy prices? To what extent is how many various household groups be affected by specific economic shocks? So how does this influence the situation of different household groups? And to what extent are younger people concentrated in the lower income groups, for example? And how may specific government policies affect various household groups? So all kinds of questions that are very important for policymakers. Then we do have a lot of information already available from microstatistics. So why can't we just solely rely on that type of information? In that sense, we see an increasing emphasis over the past years to have an alignment to macroeconomic aggregates, mainly to complement what is already available from microstatistics. So if you align to the national accounts totals, it will provide a more comprehensive picture of economic inequality, including elements that may not be covered in microstatistics. So an important example is social transfers in kind. So these are services as provided by the government for free or very small prices. So for example, free education, free healthcare. And it really makes a difference if you have to pay for these kinds of services out of pocket or if these are provided for free by the government. So it's important indeed to have this included in analyses of inequality. Aligning with important macroeconomic aggregates such as GDP, GNI, national wealth. This also allows users with a drill down possibility for key macroeconomic aggregates. So it really broadens the scope of the analyses, taking into consideration all kinds of aspects. And it also has the benefit of capturing households and transactions that are typically underrepresented in microdata. So for example, it's very difficult to capture the very rich. It's very difficult to capture informal activities, items that are typically underreported, such as self-employed income and consumption of alcohol and tobacco. So it's important to capture those in the distributional national accounts. And it also leads to a high degree of international comparability as the national accounts are relying on the same concepts, definitions, and methods across countries. In this sense, we probably need both the micro perspective, the macro perspective, and they both come with their own pros and cons. And in the end, it will depend on the specific policy needs, which results may best be suited for the policy analysis. So this explained why we need distributional national accounts. Now an overview of some of the international initiatives. So it started in 2009 with the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi report that really stressed the importance to have more macroeconomic information on the household sector and to also extend this with macroeconomic statistics on distributional information. And this has led to various international initiatives. So in 2011, together with Eurostat, we launched an expert group on disparities in a national accounts framework, the EGDNA, to develop methodology to compile results on income, consumption, and saving. At the same time, 2016, a couple of years later, the ECB started work to develop distributional wealth accounts for the EU and European countries via an expert group on distributional financial accounts. And in 2023, we have launched a new expert group to broaden the work of the ECB to incorporate other countries, so non-EU countries. And this is called the expert group on the distribution of household wealth. And we will hear more about that later on by Philip. And also important to mention the work by the World Inequality Lab, the WID World. They have done a lot of work to develop distributional national accounts as well, mainly relying on fiscal data and with a slightly different scope of income and wealth, so broader than what we capture within our statistics, and also slightly different methodology compared to our approach. So it might lead to slightly different results in that sense. And also the distributional national accounts have been included in the 2025 SNA, so the new system of national accounts that has recently been adopted by the UN Statistical Committee and to which countries around the world will start compiling their results. Also important to mention the G20 Data Gaps Initiative. This is an initiative that was launched after the great financial crisis to close some of the obvious gaps that we saw in statistical reporting. It has been running now for several years, and we are now in phase 3 of the G20 Data Gaps Initiative with 2 specific recommendations on distributional results. So distributional results on income, consumption, and saving in recommendation 8, and distributional results on wealth in recommendation 9. And G20 economies and interested countries are encouraged to comply with specific targets. So for the distributional results, the target is to have results for 2021, 22, and or 23 at the income and wealth quintile level by early 2025, so earlier last year, and we have received several results. And by the end of 2026, to have annual results within 1.5 years after the reference period at the decile level, and if possible, also according to additional breakdowns. We understand that this might not be feasible for all countries, so that's why there is also a second best solution. So to by the end of 2026, the end of this year, to have results at least every 3 years, published within 4 years after the reference period at the income quintile, or if possible, decile level. And we are working with countries towards these targets. So now to provide some information on the aim and the scope of the work. So what we are trying to do with our expert groups is to develop methodology to produce distributional results for income, consumption, and wealth, consistent with national accounts concepts using microdata sources. So we start with what is available from the national accounts. So the overall totals for the household sector, also looking at changes over time. We try to break it down into specific household groups. So for example, by deciles. But we need to rely on the microdata, survey data, administrative data to compile the results. And the microdata are relying on micro concepts. So we need to take several steps to arrive at the distributional national accounts. And I will say a bit more on that in the next few slides. So looking at the scope, we are aiming for breakdowns by specific household groupings. So the standard of living by disposable income, by net wealth group, broken down by quintile or decile or percentile. We also have optional breakdowns by main source of income of households, by specific household type, but you can also envisage other types of breakdowns, for example, the age of the reference person in the household. The unit of analysis that we use in the work is the household. We don't focus on the individual, but the household. mainly as income and wealth is assumed to be pooled and shared within the household, with certain types of goods and services consumed collectively. You share accommodation, you might consume food, you might go on vacation together, etc., etc. So this is why we focus on the household. The focus then is on private households. We exclude institutional households, so people residing in prison, in boarding school, nursing homes, mainly because they behave differently from private households, different consumption in that sense, and their results are not really comparable. It's not comparable if you compare a nursing home with 100 individuals with private households consisting of two parents and two kids. So the recommendation is to present them separately. Also, collection of socio-demographic information to accompany the results. So to have more insights in the age, the gender, the educational level, the housing status of people in the various income groups. So what is the characteristics of people in households in the lower end of the distribution and in the higher end of the distribution? And I will show some results later on in the presentation. Also important to mention here that we focus on equivalized results. So taking into account different consumption needs of households of different size and composition. And in that regard, it's making a huge difference if you have an income of 3,000 euros to spend with two adults and three children, or if you have 3,000 euros to spend for a single person household. So we really want to arrive at comparable results. And then looking at the economies of scale that households are benefiting from. So there is no need to assign a weight of 1 to each household member. You don't need 2 kitchens if you have a 2-person household, or 3 if there is a kid involved. So what we advise countries to do is to apply an equivalent scale. So for example, the OECD modified equivalent scale to assign a value to the household head. So in this case, 1 for the household head, 0.5 for each additional adult member, and 0.3 for each kid. Countries can select alternative scales if this better reflects the situation in the country. And this is quite straightforward for income and consumption. You look at the current consumption needs of the current household composition. For wealth, this is more tricky because this mainly relates to the question whether wealth is shared within the household, when it's going to be used for consumption, at what point in time, and which household members are going to benefit from that. So this is still ongoing discussion. To run you through the methodology, so we have a step-by-step approach. We start with adjusting national accounts totals to arrive at the results for private households. So we remove any results, any amounts linked to institutional households. In the next step, we determine the relevant variables from microdata sources in relation to the national accounts variables. So countries are looking at survey data, fiscal records, other administrative data sources to see what best matches the national accounts variables. As not all information may be found in the microdata, in the third step, we have to impute for missing elements, and we have to scale the microdata to the adjusted national accounts totals, as they might not always perfectly align. In step 4, we can cluster households on the basis of the breakdown that is targeted. So, for example, on the basis of their disposable income. And then in the 5th step, we can derive relevant indicators for the household groups. This sounds very straightforward. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. And the main challenges that countries are facing in compiling the results mainly relate to the fact that not all items and elements may be covered in the microdata sources. So some of the items are specific to the national account. So we need to make some imputations there to rely on some assumptions. Some groups of people may not be covered in microdata sources. So the very rich, people falling below a threshold in administrative data. Some sub-items may not be covered in microdata sources, so income from informal activities, for example. And this all means that we will have to rely on assumptions, additional information to impute for this missing information. And Another major challenge is that the micro aggregates will normally deviate from the macro aggregates. So sometimes what you can find in a survey is not aligning very well to what you can find in the national accounts. And to give an example, sometimes we see an amount of 100 in the national accounts in terms of dividends paid out by companies that should go to the household sector. And then in the survey data, we might only capture maybe an amount of 20. And then the main challenge for the compilers is to allocate the remaining 80 to the relevant households. And it's really important to do that in the best possible way to arrive high quality results. Now running through the work we have been doing in the area of income, consumption, and saving. So as I already mentioned, this was initiated by the OECD Eurostat, EGDNA. This group already developed a template, guidelines, a handbook, and there is a link in the presentation that brings you to the handbook. The calculations in this work are done by the members of the group. So here you see all 30 countries that are currently collaborating in the work of the group, and we are very open to onboard more countries that are interested in this work. We also developed a centralized estimation approach in R to compile results for non-EU countries not engaging in the work, so to broaden the scope of countries, relying on data from the Luxembourg income study. And Eurostat has been doing the same, but then focusing on EU countries on the basis of EU Silk and household budget survey data. Several countries already regularly publish their results. Some have started to do so on an ad hoc basis, and you can find them in our online databases. And as also mentioned, the next data collection round will take place this year, focusing on a more granular household result. So keep an eye out on that. To focus on the concepts, so we focus on disposable income. So this consists of self-employed income, imputed rent on dwellings, compensation of employees, so wages and salaries, property income like interest payments, dividends, and then we deduct any property income paid. So for example, interest payments on loans, mortgage loans. We add cash, social benefits in cash and other transfers that households may receive, and we deduct any taxes and social contributions they pay. We also add in social transfers in kind to arrive at adjusted disposable income, so to have a more comprehensive income measure. And then on the consumption side, we have several consumption items that feed into total consumption. And again, adding in social transfers in kind, so the services provided by government for free, to arrive at a comprehensive consumption measure. And on the basis of this, we are also able to derive saving results. So finally, before handing over to Philip, some results. So here we show the adjusted disposable income and then the ratio of each quintile to the average for the household sector as a whole. So how do they compare to the results of the household sector as a whole, highlighting the results for 5 specific countries. You can find more countries in the online database. Here you see indeed relatively low results for Q1. Mexico shows the lowest ratio, 0.35. And then we have the US 0.4. On the upper hand, for Q1, we see France 0.66. And then it's a slowly upward slope towards the second quintile, the third quintile. Fourth quintile, people are starting to receive income more or less in line with the average of the household sector as a whole. It's still below the average for a country like Mexico. And then a larger jump to the fifth quintile, with particularly Mexico and the United States showing relatively high ratios. A different way of presenting this is comparing the ratio of the highest income quintile to the lowest income quintile, so Q5 divided by Q1. Again, this affirms what we just saw in the previous slide. Mexico and the US showing relatively high ratios. So for Mexico, the people in the richest income quintile earning 7.6 times what people are earning in the lowest income quintile. And then on the lower end of the distribution, we see countries like France, the Netherlands, and Ireland. We also derive results on savings. So saving as a percentage of the income for the various income quintiles. What we see here is large negative savings for the first quintile. We see this consistently across countries and also when we compare results over time. This might be due to the life cycle hypothesis, people saving when they are still young and investing in their education, in their career, and also saving when they reach the retirement age. Might also be due to temporary income shocks that people might face and then ad hoc move to a lower income quintile. So these might be potential reasons for that. And we also see negative savings up to the third and fourth quintile for specific countries. So that is also an interesting insight from these results. Finally, as I mentioned, socio-demographic breakdowns that we collect. So this is showing the composition of specific groups, age groups, in terms of where they end up in the income distribution. So some takeaways that younger persons are more concentrated in lower income quintiles in Belgium and Mexico. We also see a strong concentration of the 45-64 in highest income groups in Belgium and Canada relative to the other countries. We also see concentration in higher income quintiles rises with age in Mexico. And another takeaway is that we see relatively large groups of 65 plus in the second income quintile in countries like Belgium, Canada, and Slovenia. So we have a lot of these social demographic breakdowns, and they really provide useful insights in all of this. In terms of next steps for the income consumption and saving, we want to arrive at more granular household breakdowns, deciles, or maybe top and bottom percentile. We want to improve the timeliness of the results, so aligning with the 18 months after the reference period. We want to broaden the range of countries involved in the work. We want to extend the length of the time series. We would also like to increase the frequency. Some countries report on an annual basis, but several still on a multi-annual basis. And we would like to develop additional indicators where possible, and also price indices per household group to arrive at real income measures. So before moving to Philip, we would like to ask another Mentimeter question, just to get your insights in what you see of the highest relevance for the further developments at this stage for the income, consumption, and saving. So do you think we need to improve the granularity, the timeliness, the broadening the range of countries, extending the length, increasing the frequency, developing additional indicators, or developing price indices? And in the Mentimeter, you're asked to, for each of those items, to score from 1 to 5 if you feel that this is a lower priority or a higher priority. So 1 if you feel this is of less relevance, and a 5 if you think this should be really at the top of our minds. We may give you a bit more time because it's quite a task. We realize, but we think this is going to provide us with very useful insights in the next steps for the work, and we would really like to tune it to the specific needs. Dongwook, if I can ask you to share the Mentimeter, still giving people a bit of time to fill out the forms. So if you can start showing the Mentimeter, the online version, and then we can start seeing some of the results coming in. I'm not sure if it's our laptop. I don't know, Dongwook, did you already start sharing?
Yes, I'm trying again. I shared already, but I'm not sure why you can't see.
Yeah, it might be Philip's. I don't know. Karin, you're also online. Can you see the results?
No, I can't.
Oh, okay, then if Dongwook, if you can have a look, if you can make it work, we can also stop sharing from our side.
No, that's fine. We can see.
Yeah, I now see the results. Quite a few people already provided results just to see. So improving the timeliness of the annual results, quite a high score, broadening the range of countries. I think that's also very useful information indeed. We see there's also quite a consistent preference from people. A bit lower, we see the increasing granularity, extending the length of the time series, and developing additional indicators. I think that is useful indeed to know. We sometimes get questions about the percentile results, but I think what I take from this is that there is really a demand for more countries to be included in the databases and to improve the timeliness of the annual results. This is one of the challenges that we are facing at the moment. It's difficult to develop nowcasting methodologies, but yeah, we will further explore this. And broadening the range of countries is indeed to have more countries participating in the work of the expert group, compiling the relevant results, and also expanding on our centralized approach to compile results for countries that are missing currently from the databases. So making more countries available to the users. So with that, I would like to hand over to Philip. So Dongwook, if you can stop sharing your screen, then yeah, we can start sharing the screen from our side again, and I will move the laptop to Philip.
Thanks, Jurit. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Philip Chan. I'm a researcher in the Distributional National Accounts workstream. And so now we're turning to a newer stream of work. So whereas Jurit introduced income, consumption, and savings, I'll be talking about wealth. So the OECD launched an expert group on distributional household wealth in 2023. Since then, we've met regularly to discuss various issues and methodologies and to improve the existing results. The group has developed a template and a set of guidelines to help compilers derive results, and we have started engaging in data collection rounds. In this expert group, we are joined by over 30 OECD countries as well as G20 economies. We are leveraging off of the existing work done by the ECB expert group on distribution of financial accounts and by the various countries already compiling distributional wealth results. As with income and consumption, we also have a centralized estimation approach that is done in R to develop results for countries not currently engaged in the work. And this, again, like the EGDNA work, relies on publicly available data set called the Luxembourg Wealth Study. Early last year, we engaged in an experimental data collection round. So we have some experimental results. These results are still limited in scope, focusing on financial wealth, but excluding occupational pension entitlements, but also includes housing wealth. We will have a second data collection round later this year on the basis of an extended wealth scope that I'll talk about momentarily. Among others, this extended wealth scope also includes business wealth and occupational pension wealth. It seems that my screen is frozen again.
Give it a second. Last time it popped up after.
Yeah. Today is not our day.
I think
IT.
yeah.
So please bear with us a minute.
And if it takes too long, maybe. There
Okay.
you are. Yeah.
We are back. So let me talk about the wealth concept for the wealth scope. For the wealth concept, we use net wealth as defined in the system of national accounts, which is assets minus liabilities. These assets and liabilities come from the SNA household balance sheets, and they include under assets, non-financial assets, where we have housing wealth and non-financial business wealth. Under financial assets, we have currency and deposits, bonds, loans, equity, life and non-life insurance technical reserves, financial derivatives, and employee stock options, as well as trade credits and advances. On the liability side, we have loans, financial derivatives and employee stock options, and also trade credits and advances. If we subtract financial liabilities from financial assets, we have net financial worth. And if we sum up net financial worth with non-financial assets, we arrive at household wealth, which is our target wealth concept. Now, we know that many of you are familiar with distributional national accounts or national accounts statistics in general. So you might already notice that some balance sheet items are missing here. And indeed, they are. And that is because the SNA wealth concept is very comprehensive. So it was deemed too challenging to include every item from the get-go. So we are implementing a staged approach, so building towards a more comprehensive wealth concept over time. The most salient omission here probably is occupational pensions. So we have 63 in national accounts terms. In the 2026 data collection, they will be collected as a memo item. Memo item means that the household's position in the distribution are not influenced by this asset. So whether or not a household has occupational pensions and how much will not be relevant, but that is still a breakdown that we will have, and it is still useful information to know. Another memo item is other accounts receivable and payable. I won't elaborate a lot on this item, just to say that it is a very national accounts item, and oftentimes it relates to tax rebates or taxes that have been accumulated but not yet paid. Yorick mentioned that we engaged in a data collection round early last year. That was the case for income consumption, but also wealth. So here we wanted to share with you two key results on the 23 countries for which we have information available from the experimental data collection. Please bear in mind, however, that these are experimental results based on a truncated wealth concept that excludes currently pensions and non-financial business wealth. So here we are seeing the ratio to average again, but for wealth for 6 representative countries. Again, this indicator shows the amount of wealth held by each quintile relative to the average, which is the line at 1. In general, we see that net wealth increases gradually from the bottom quintile to the 4th quintile, although at very low levels, and then it rises steeply from the 4th to the 5th quintile. The dynamic here is quite similar to income and consumption, but you can see that the scale is different. So here we're ranging from below 0 to about 4.5. So disparity is more for wealth. Looking at these 6 countries, the US reports the highest ratio in the top quintile, about 4.4 times the mean. This is followed by Denmark. At the same time, the bottom quintile of these countries are below 0, so liabilities are greater than assets. So again, we see that wealth is more unequally distributed than income and consumption. And overall, of the 23 countries for which we have information, negative wealth occurs in about half of them. On the other hand, Lithuania and Hungary see the highest bottom quintile ratio, while also having among the lowest top quintile ratio, indicating relatively less disparity. Most countries still experience below average wealth at the 4th quintile, except the Netherlands, which is this small blue dot poking up the average line. In particular, US is at half the average. We see that wealth disparity is generally driven by financial assets and moderated by housing wealth. We wanted to show you a second result. So this is the ratio of wealth held by the top 20% relative to the remaining 80%. So this shows how many times the top quintile holds in net wealth compared with the rest of the households. Very different, or not very different, but different from income and consumption. Here we use the bottom 80% instead of the bottom 20% in this ratio because of negative wealth. So looking at the latest year, which is the blue bar, we see that across countries, this ratio is between 1 and 3.5 in all countries except the US, where it is 7. The lowest ratio is Malta at around 1.4. And then comparing this, the latest year with 2015, which is the box, the ratio was higher in recent times in a majority of the countries, indicating a possible increase of inequality between the top quintile and the rest of the distribution taken as a whole. You see that for the US, there is a rather dramatic drop for the country. And this might give the impression of wealth deconcentration, but that is not exactly the case because when we zoom into the top 1% share of wealth, that is actually quite stable. What is driving this is actually the reduced debt share of the bottom quintile. So that's the results. So these are the results we want to highlight. Again, bearing in mind that this is without pensions at the moment, and with pensions, the picture might change. In terms of the next steps for the work, we, like the EGDNA, would like to broaden the set of countries. We would like to broaden the wealth scope to include some of the missing items that we mentioned. We want to arrive at more granular household breakdowns, so to have this decile information as well as the top and bottom percentiles. We want to improve the timeliness of the results, which is one of the key priorities that you've indicated for income and consumption. Here we want to do that as well. Again, want to broaden the range of countries for which information is available. And again, we are developing a centralized approach to achieve this. And lastly, we want to arrive at harmonized breakdowns across income, consumption, and wealth, so to have a joint distribution of all of these three dimensions in the near future. At this point, let me go to Dongwook for some Mentimeter questions that we would like to have your opinion on.
Maybe stop sharing.
Thank you. Okay. I mentioned in the previous slide on the wealth concept that our wealth concept doesn't include some assets such as pensions and other accounts payable and receivable. So we would like to ask you, what are some of the items that we should prioritize. But in addition to this, some items in the wealth concept, we understand that some member countries have difficulty compiling them. And indeed, some of them are difficult to compile. So we would like to have your view on which items you consider to be the most important and that ones we should prioritize. So here's a list of assets that are either missing right now in the wealth concept or are difficult for members to compile. They include currency, business wealth, occupational pension wealth, social security pension wealth, crypto assets, other accounts payable and receivable, valuables, and consumer durables.
So let's see, we already have 80 out of 206. So
I'll wait a bit because there are quite a few assets here. And you may check more than one item. So please select all that you think are important to prioritize.
we can see from the chat that people are also making additional suggestions. I already noticed crypto assets, so that is definitely something we will look into. It's also a high priority as part of the SNA updates.
Right.
This is something we want to further explore, but it's a difficult one. But if people have any suggestions for additional items, please let us know in the chat. It's also going to be taken on board. I think in view of time, we might.
In view of time, we might go to the results. Okay, so there's so 65% of the respondents indicated that occupational pension wealth should be prioritized. So that's quite a majority that we see. The next is business wealth. And indeed, I should emphasize that financial business wealth is already in the wealth concept. So it is non-financial business wealth that we're targeting. But of course, we need the totality of business wealth. Next, we have social security pension wealth. This is outside of the SNA and it is outside of a wealth scope at the moment. But we do realize that this is very important source of asset for many, many households, particularly for those in the bottom of the distribution. And then we also have currency and crypto assets. That's very interesting. And then perhaps the items that are not so important for now include other accounts payable, receivable, and consumer durables and valuables. So thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. So this is the same question as for the EGDNA. In your view, what is of the highest relevance for further development at this stage? So expanding the wealth concept to include some of the missing items from the last page, increasing granularity, so having more breakdowns, improving timeliness of annual results, broadening the range of countries, and harmonize results across income, consumption, and wealth. I will stay here for some time. Indeed, because the wealth work stream is relatively new for us, there are a lot of directions that we can take. We would certainly like to do many of these, but of course, under resource constraints and competing priorities, we very much appreciate your view on what you consider to be important aspects of the work. I see that some consider expanding the wealth concept to be more important in the chat. And I see that our response rate has flattened, so perhaps don't wook. We can look at the results. Thank you. So quite many respondents consider that harmonizing results across income, consumption, and wealth to be important. And the distribution of that leans to the right quite a bit by a margin. And then the second highest relevance is expanding the wealth concept to include missing items. So we'll definitely take that under advisement in conjunction with the last Mentimeter question, broadening the range of countries as well. And certainly that will provide us with a good rationale to keep developing the centralized approach to help countries compile information. And of course, if you're interested in joining the expert group, please feel free to contact us. Okay. So for now, I think this is okay. We want to thank you for your participation, and I will now turn back to Jurit to close the webinar. Let's finish the presentation.
At least the presentation, indeed. We still want to take one or two questions. Just to finish with some of the next steps for the work, as it was already highlighted, we want to broaden the wealth scope to include some of the missing items, and thanks for your input for that. We also try to arrive at more granular household results. So in this collection round, we go from the quintile to the decile. Let's see. So overall, broadening the range of countries. So we want to assist new countries in developing first estimates and by further improving the centralized approach. So if countries are interested to join the work, even if you are at the very start, please reach out to us. We will be very glad to help out, to give you advice on how to best approach this. Explore possibilities to increase the granularity, the timeliness, and the frequency of the results, and to expand the wealth concept, as I just mentioned. We want to further improve the methodology. I saw a few questions already popping up in the chat on this. This is definitely something that we are aiming for, closing the micro-macro gaps to the extent possible, improving the imputations. This will really help us to be able to publish at a more granular level of detail, because we really have to reduce the margins of error surrounding the results to go to the decile and the percentile level. We will update the EGDNA handbook to align with the 2025 SNA and prepare a first version of the EGDHW handbook, so on wealth, hopefully towards the end of this year or early next year. We will conduct the 2026 data collection round, collaborating with a lot of countries to provide us with the results and assisting them in compiling the results, focusing on the decile level. And we would also like to explore possibilities to develop joint distributions, so having consistent information across income, consumption, and wealth to have a comprehensive view of a specific group of households. And the ECB has already been doing work in this area. We also know that Italy has been doing work in this area. So there are some advancements in this area as well. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. I know that we are a bit stretched for time. I just want to quickly check with Karin if there might be maybe one or two questions for me and Philip As mentioned, we will get back to you on the various questions raised during the webinar later on, but maybe we can already take one or two.
Yes, thank you, Jorrit. One of the we received a lot of interest and enthusiasm from participants. Many questions. Some of them are quite clarification questions on how to proceed with specific calculations, whether the R codes are shared, and whether you what for instance households who live in rented properties which belongs to the government, are they included or excluded? So we have lots of practical questions, but we also have some more general questions from you as an international organization agent. What do you see as the main challenge for countries in developing distributional national accounts data? So pick which one you want to answer. In any case, we will provide answers to all later on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And yeah, I saw a lively and interaction, or a lot of questions popping up, a lot of comments popping up in the chat. So thank you very much for that. And if people still have issues that they would like to raise, please type them in the chat and we will get back to you on all of that. So regarding the R code, so if countries are interested, we indeed make this available to countries. So send me or Philip a message, and we can help you. We will share the code and help you in setting it up. Hopefully that will help countries that are relatively new to the work. I think focusing on the main challenges for compilers. We see, particularly at this point in time, there is a lot of budget pressures on statistical offices and central banks. We see in some countries slightly lower priority for the distributional national accounts, and particularly in times where they also have to implement the new system of national accounts, the balance of payments, a lot of increasing demands, a lot of additional breakdowns that they have to target. So I think there is a challenge to be able to dedicate the relevant resources to this, and particularly to improve the results, we need to close the macro gap. So as I mentioned before, sometimes we see a value of 100 in the national accounts, a value of 10 or 20 in the microdata, and we really need to figure out what is causing this gap. And we really need people to sit down together, the people from the national account side, the macroeconomics, and the micro experts, because from both ends they have the best insights in the underlying concepts, what might be missing, what could be the main reason for a specific gap. And I think this is probably the most challenging element for the countries that are involved in the work, and also in the meetings of the expert group. This is what most countries are raising as the biggest challenge. And our recommendation is really invest in exploring the main reasons for these gaps, and sit down together with the micro and the macro experts. This cannot be solved only from the micro side or only from the macro side. You really have to collaborate on this. So this is a huge plea for countries to further look into this. I don't know, Philip, if you want to.
Okay, yeah.
Looking at the time, I think we have to come to a close of the webinar. Thanks very much for participating. We were very pleased to see so many people attending. So hopefully this has been useful for you. I think what we have been trying to convey is the importance of the work that we are progressing. We realize that there is still a lot of work still ahead of us, but please stay tuned for what is coming. As mentioned, towards the end of the year, we will have hopefully results at the decile level for a broad range of countries. So reach out to us if you would like to obtain more information, if you would like to get access to the R code, if you have any specific questions. For users on the call, please also reach out to your national compilers. They might be involved in this type of work, and they can benefit, I think, from the exchange with the user perspective. So please have a look at that as well. And then as a closing of the webinar, this is the first webinar that we have been organizing. We would like to take your views whether this has been useful, whether we should do this on more topics. So we will follow up with a short survey asking you on feedback regarding today's webinar, but also any suggestions for future webinars that we might do. So in the next few days, we will share with you the presentation. We will share with you a link to the webpage where you can find more information on the project and how to access the data, and also how to access the templates and the handbook. And we will also send you an evaluation survey. And then, as mentioned, we will also get back to you on the questions that have been raised in the chat during the webinar. I saw quite a few questions, so I can't guarantee that we get back to you already in the next 1 or 2 days, but we will do our best to respond to all the questions and provide an overview of the responses. And in that sense, if you have any remaining questions, type them in the chat now, any comments, or get back to us, send a message to Philip or to myself, and we will be very happy to follow up with you. So with that, a big thanks to Philip, to Karin for helping to organize this meeting, and also to Dongwook, who's done a lot of work in the background, and particularly in setting up the webinar. He's been very instrumental. So thank you very much all for your help. And then thank you once again for your participation. And for now, wishing you a nice rest of the day. And hopefully we'll see each other at other occasions. Thanks and enjoy the day.